بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والحمد لله رب العالمين اللهم صل على سيدنا وحبيبنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا. Alright, so last time we finished revising the book of purification, or Kitab al-Tahara, and that's always the first chapter of every book of fiqh. So last time we started, we finished Kitab al-Tahara, and if you open any book of fiqh, whether it's Shafiee, Hanafi, Maliki or Hanbali, or even if you study the book of Zahiriyya, or you look, the fiqh of Zahiriyya, or even the fiqh of the Shia, it always starts with Kitab al-Tahara, always starts with purity. It's just how scholars throughout the last number of centuries have always done Kutub al-Fiqh. They begin with the most important part, which is purity, and they talk about purity, religious purity, they talk about physical purity, and they talk about purity that is needed for rituals, for salah, and for other acts of worship. Now, the second chapter, the second kitab or second bab, is also always Kitab al-Salah. It's always the book of prayer. Always talk about salah, and this is one that is really important, obviously. I find that there's lack of clarity amongst a large number of Muslims, or the majority of Muslims, regarding issues of salah. What is mukhtalaf alayhi? What are issues that are, there's differed upon amongst scholars, where there's more than one thing that you can do, and the issues that are not differed upon, that you should do all the time, like they are obligatory, or they are pillars of prayer itself. So today, inshallah, we'll start reading what the Shafi'i said. I will do some comparative fiqh on certain issues. Other issues I will not. So if you ask me, I won't answer, or I'll leave it for later. But so other issues I will talk about what the ulama talked about, just because I think it'll add something to this review that will help you out. All right. So we begin from Kitab al-Salah. Yes.
Are we going till Isha?
No, we'll go until 9. And we will go from 8 till 9 and all year round, because I can't start before 8 because of the kids. And Isha is going to keep on going back until it hits 7:45 at some point, wallahu a'lam. So we'll just go from 8 till 9 all year round, inshallah. So even if we pray Isha tonight, we may come back for 10 minutes to finish maybe another couple of sentences in the book. And then at 9 o'clock, we'll pack up and we'll leave, bi'idhnillah ta'ala. All right.
I think it usually takes 10 or 15 minutes.
There'll be a couple more minutes after that. If you guys want to stop at Isha, that's fine by me, but we don't have much time. Like, we barely have 40 minutes at this point. All right. So as-salatul mafrudatu khamsun. So the obligatory, and the word mafrud, right? The word mafrud means it's obligatory. You must do it. Khamsun, 5 prayers, and this is something that we all know. Now, when it comes to the number of the obligatory prayers and the number of raka'at that they have within them, these are all things that were taken from the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ and from the actions of the Prophet ﷺ. There's a difference between the two. What he says ﷺ is usually, most commonly, related to us through ahad, meaning one person narrating from another person. It's a chain of narration that only has one person per level, usually. But what he did, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when it comes to rituals, are usually related to us in big numbers. Why? Because these are things that everyone participated in. And after he died, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the masajid were still praying the way they prayed during his life. So prayer was narrated to us in the 5 prayers, and the number of rak'ahs that they have aren't things that are necessarily attached to verbal narrations from the Prophet ﷺ. Rather, it's a norm that Muslims had been doing for at least the last 13 years before he passed away, and then was continued. The practice was continued, and it was normalized amongst all new Muslims without narration of hadith. Meaning, someone who was doing da'wah wouldn't necessarily narrate a hadith. He would just tell them, okay, there's 5 prayers, and this is how you do it, because that's how he has done it all his life, and that's how his parents did it, and that's how the Prophet ﷺ did it. So a lot of things in Islam have something called tawatur ma'nawi, or tawatur amali, meaning the tawatur, meaning the authentication, the high level of authenticity that these rituals have, are not based on verbal narrations that only have one person in the chain. Rather, it is narrated to us through a large number of people through their actions. And this is sometimes not paid attention to. This is an issue that goes unidentified or unseen by people who study religious literature and religious law. There's a lot of things that became the norm of life to people, like the amount of zakah being 2.5%. This is what all Muslims knew. Now, there's one hadith narrated by not too many people within the chain, verbally, but that is what Muslims knew and continue to know, because that's what he left, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, with the Sahaba when he passed away. All right, so salah is like that. Details of salah, however, Sahaba differed upon. And the reason they differed upon, because the Prophet ﷺ apparently, and this is what I believe to be the fact, prayed in different ways. Meaning, when it came to details, he did different things sometimes. It wasn't always the exact same thing. And that's why we have narrations that said he did this and other narrations that said he didn't do it. Or he was observed doing it sometimes and observed not doing it other times. Why? Because when it comes to the details, the Prophet ﷺ wasn't the habit of him ﷺ or of Islam to make the details of actions extremely rigid. That's not the norm of the deen. The norm of the deen is the basics are very clear, are structured, are agreed upon, and the details are issues where more than one thing can be done. And that is the norm for almost everything within Islam, and Salah is not an exception to the rule. And I hope that point is clear, or you understand what I'm saying. So and that's why you're going to see that a lot of things within Salawat are differed upon among scholars, sometimes quite heavily, based on their view of the evidence, their understanding of the evidence, and the level of authenticity that the evidence carries. Okay, so the first sentence, as-salatul mafrudatu khamsun, there are 5 obligatory acts of salah, of prayer. Now, I'm not going to explain what the word salah means, it'll take too long, but I will quickly refer to the root. The root comes from sila, right? So the root comes from sad lam ta, right? And the concept of sila that is taken from it means what? Connection, right? So derived from that is salah, which is the ritual that connects. So that is the concept behind prayer. This is the ritual that connects you with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is very specific in that term, in that matter. It's not like other rituals. The point of it is that you connect with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's why you're doing it. That part of it, no one differs upon. All scholars agree that the point of you praying is connecting with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You will not find 2 scholars of madhab saying, no, it has a different, no, everyone agrees to that. The mechanics of it, however, can be differed upon. Mechanics are less, on the priority scale, are lower than the actual concept of connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is something we all have to kind of keep in mind. All right, so what is the first one that the imam, now they start by the first prayer of the day. Now what is the first prayer of the day? No, it's Dhuhr. The first prayer of day, because Fajr is prayed before the sun actually comes up. So Fajr is seen as a night prayer. It's not seen as a day prayer. All right, Fajr is seen as a prayer of the night for most scholars. Some of them differ, but most of them see it like that. That's why when you read the books of fiqh, you will find when they count prayers, now they'll start with Dhuhr, because that's their first prayer of daylight, when the sun's up, right? They see Fajr to be a prayer of the night. Why? Because still the sun has not come up yet, right? That's the whole point. Actually, if the sun's up when you're praying Fajr, you prayed it too late. Correct? If you prayed Fajr when the sun's up, then you did it too late. So it has to be before the sun actually comes up. So they start with Dhuhr. That's why the number one, al-Dhuhru, if you're keeping, وَأَوَّلُ وَقْتِهَا زَوَالُ الشَّمْسِ. And the beginning of its time is زَوَالُ الشَّمْس. What does زَوَالُ الشَّمْس mean? What does the word zawal mean?
Like meridian point or the center point of the sky.
Zawal means when it moves away from the center of the sky. So we're standing on this piece of land, right? And I'm going to say that this is east, even though it's on the left, but this is east, all right? So the sun comes up here. When it reaches the middle of the sky, exactly perpendicular to the ground that you're standing on. Of course, it can't be for all land, because the earth is not flat, it's round. But for the place you're standing on, the moment it moves this way, just by 1 centimeter or 1 milli, it's called zawal. Zala means something was removed from somewhere, right? So zawalu shams meaning the sun was removed from the middle of the sky. Zala is removed from the middle of the sky. So how I'm going to explain this to you is that when it's right in the middle of the sky, if you put a stick right there, right? Let's say this is a 3D picture, all right? You put the stick right there. Would it have a shadow? Would there be shade? Nothing, right? So though it hasn't started yet, it starts the moment there's shade. As small as that. The beginning is called zawal at that point, right? So it would be this way actually, just so I don't confuse people who are, so here. The moment it moves. the moment it moves, it's called zawal. I mean, it moved from the middle of the sky. That is called zawal shams. The shams now has moved from the middle of the sky. That's when dhuhr begins. That is the beginning of salatul dhuhr. All right. وآخره إذا صار ظل كل شيء مثله بعد ظل الزوال. And the end of it is when إذا صار ظل كل شيء, if the shade of everything becomes twice its size, or exactly its size. مثله, exactly its size. بعد ظل الزوال, after the beginning of that first shade, at the beginning of that first zawal shade. So when it ends is when the sun moves forward to the point. Of course, it's not a black sun, or maybe, but it's going to be exactly the same length. So this is, that's roughly the same length, right? So this is the end of dhuhr. No. This is for the Jumhur. Al-Hanafiya, for the Hanafiya, what they say, but وآخر الظهر, at the end of dhuhr time, إذا صار ظل كل شيء مثليه, when it becomes twice its length, or yeah. So for the Hanafiya, it's not too far down the road because the sun starts to aggressively come closer to the horizon at that point. So it's only around 40 to 45 minutes difference for the Hanafiya and for the Jumhur. For them it has to be another exact, so it has to be twice. For the Jumhur it has to be exactly equal. I mean, this has to equal this. It has to be exactly the same. For the Hanafiya, when it has to be twice, right? Which is a difference of around 45 minutes. So the Hanafiya, for them, dhuhr starts after zawal and ends when the shade of everything is twice its length, right? And for the Jumhur, it's when it's exactly the same length. That is when the time of dhuhr ends. Now, should I talk about? There's, for the Malikiya specifically, have an understanding where there's time that is mushtarak. There's a common time for both dhuhr and asr. That's around dhul al-mithl. So once it's exactly the same height, just before that or after that is the time for where the Malikiya say that this time works for both dhuhr and asr. But they're the only ones who say that, and it's a very specific ruling that I'll talk about when we read, inshallah, the text of the Malikiya. But just know that they do have something specific regarding common time for dhuhr and asr. The Malikiya have something regarding that. Just kind of keep that in the back of your head. Okay, back of your mind. Yes?
So in Saudi Arabia, what do they go on?
They go on the Jumhur, so meaning they stick to the exact same length, which is what the Jumhur said, which was the Hanabila, the Shafi'iyya, and the Malikiyya agreed to. It's only the Hanafiyya, only the Madhab al-Hanafi that sees it's twice the length. Basically, what we're doing right now, dhuhr is also is 4:35. That is what the Jumhur says. That's what most of the majority of the madhahib say. If you were to go by the Hanafi, it would be around 5 o'clock.
They have their own shamas and they do their own thing?
No, they just have the understanding of Asr being another 45 minutes later, based on evidence that they understand a bit differently. They just have their own, again, it's all about understanding of evidence. They understand it a bit differently. They saw, their understanding was going to be, that the shade is going to be twice the length of of the thing itself. Then Jumhur said, no, it has to be exactly the same length, and they have their debates on why it is. So you can actually take either one if you want, but the Jumhur have a stronger evidence on this one. And they have the evidence is a bit clearer for the Jumhur, so I would stick to that, but I will of course explain to you that there are different opinions regarding things. والعصر, so the second thing, عصر, وأول وقتها الزيادة على ظل المثل. The beginning of the Asr time for the Jumhur, of course, because the Hanafi have a different understanding, right, is the moment the shade exceeds the length of its origin, right? The moment it exceeds it. So when it's exactly the same, that's when dhuhr ends. When it becomes a bit more, that's when Asr begins. When it becomes a bit taller, the length of the shade is a bit longer than the origin, then that's when Asr begins. For the Hanafiya, it's when it's more than twice its length, right? Because the Hanafiya have a different understanding of when dhuhr ends, so their understanding of when Asr begins is going to be a bit different, right? The Malikiyya have a common time. Just keep that in mind, and we'll explain that inshallah when we come to it later on. وآخره في الاختيار إلى ظل المثلين. وفي الجواز إلى غروب الشمس. All right. So the Shafi'iyya have a way of looking at something at Asr, where they say that the best time to do Asr, or when you should do Asr, is between when the shade exceeds the length of the origin until it becomes twice its length. So for the Shafi'iyya, the right time for doing Asr is actually here. This is where the Hanafiyya begin. The Hanafiyya begin over here. All right. So the Hanafiyya begin when the Shafi'iyya actually see the time to end, meaning the optimal time to doing Asr. وفي الجواز mean, and it's permissible for you to do it until sunset, until the sun is completely under the horizon, or you cannot see it any longer, right? So for the Shafi'iyya, this is the optimal time, and this is for you to do Asr, but this is not for all the madhab. Meaning the Shafi'i was a bit specific when he said that prayer times will have an optimal time and a permissible time. That was something that Imam Shafi'i coined basically in the way that he did it, but not everyone else follows that regimen. Meaning the Malikiyya and the Hanabila are all fine or okay with you doing it any time since at the end of Dhuhr or when the shade is a bit more than the length of the origin until sunset. That's fine for Asr. Now the Hanafiya start when it's more than twice its the origin's length. The optimal time for Shafi'iyya is here, is between when the shade is exactly just a bit more than the length of the origin until it's twice the time of the origin. Meaning for the Shafi'iyya, for them, if Asr is 4:35, then the optimal time for the Shafi'iyya for you to pray Asr is between 4:35 and 5 o'clock. Now if you want to do something, if you want to be doing things at the optimal time, then you should do Asr as quickly as you can. Whenever Asr Adnan goes out, then do it as quickly as you can. For the Jamhur, there's no optimal time or permissible time. It's all the same. For the Hanafiya, they start a bit later. Okay? I hope that wasn't too confusing, but I need you to know at least that Asr starts after the shade is a bit longer than the origin, or a bit taller than the origin itself. Yes?
The Shafi'iyya, do they see like 5 minutes before Maghrib as being daruri time, or is that only like the Malikiyya where they say you really have to have a good reason to do that?
So the Malikiyya are the ones who look at it from a point of view where it's makruh for them for you to pray Asr at that time unless you have a good reason for it. But in all the madhahib, there's a consensus amongst the scholars that leaving it just before Maghrib is makruh. Right? So this is something that is viewed amongst all scholars, that you shouldn't leave Asr to just before Maghrib. You should try to do it as quickly as possible, depending on when they see the beginning of the Salah to be. Right? So the Shafi'iyya see it one way and the Hanafiyya see it a bit differently, but all of them agree that you should not prolong or push Asr later if you don't have to. Huh? It's just for Asr. This is specifically for Asr, and we'll talk. There's a couple of other things we'll talk about, but Asr specifically, because there's a hadith of the karaha of praying just around sunset, or as the sun is setting. There's karaha. That's a time that you don't pray, that you're not supposed to be praying. So, of course, if you haven't prayed Asr, you pray Asr, but there's karaha of pushing Asr until that moment. Yes.
There's an ayah to this as pray on time, especially the middle prayer, and it refers to Asr.
Well, again, not all scholars agree that it's Asr. Right, so not all scholars of tafsir or of fiqh agree that that ayah specifically is talking about Asr. So some of them say it's Asr, some of them say it's Fajr, some of them say it's Dhuhr, some of them, actually all 5 prayers are seen by different scholars. So you'll find there are a variety of opinions. I think that maybe the reference here is not about time.
Just making sure it's not qada, making sure.
Yeah, I don't think it's time. Although the concept of wasatiyah, of being wasat, of being moderate in everything, is something that's strong in the theme of Surah Al-Baqarah, and this ayah is in Surah Al-Baqarah. So I think what it means, Salatul Wusta, is the moderate prayer, meaning doing it in moderation. So Hafidhu ala salawati, hold on to the prayers, and specifically the moderate prayer, meaning doing it in moderation, not doing it too quickly and not prolonging it too much. I think that's the understanding that makes a bit more sense than timings, because when you say wusta, meaning the middle, you look at the word wusta as middle, and you're referring to time, then this becomes more difficult to kind of pinpoint middle of what. right? Because it's just, there's too many, the reference point is not clear in the ayah. I mean, there's no reference point for us to say what's middle and what's end and what's beginning. So Allahu A'lam, I think it's more of a moderation point than it is a, but the majority of scholars said it was Asr, but not everyone agreed to that. So that's why it's a bit of a difference of opinion. Okay. Wal Maghribu. So that's Dhuhr and Asr. Yes.
Like these ayahs, they were revealed to Rasulullah.
Yeah.
What was that point mean? Wasn't this problem at that time that which one is the central prayer?
No. The Prophet ﷺ did not explain everything, and the Sahaba were told not to ask about everything. And the Sahaba understood that a lot of the ayat of the Quran were abstract and that they were figurative, and they didn't ask too many questions, because the ayah because knowing which prayer it is or not knowing it doesn't make that much of a difference, because these are the 5 prayers. You're going to hold on to all of them. Holding on to one more than the other is not that. It doesn't really do anything, because all of them are fard. Leaving any of them is a ma'asiyah, is one of the biggest ma'asi you'll do of the day. If you've left a prayer out and you were conscious and you didn't do it, that will be one of the biggest sins of that day for you. So they understood things, and their command of the language was much stronger. So they understood that sometimes things are figurative, and they would understand things within the context of what they were listening to. Yeah.
Pray them all on time, you're fine.
Yeah, awesome.
Pray them all on time.
Just play on time and we're good. Jazakallah khair. That sums up pretty much the whole thing. والمغرب ووقتها واحد. And for the Shafi'iyya, al-Maghrib, and it has only one time for the Shafi'iyya, meaning it doesn't have a prolonged time for the Shafi'iyya. وهو غروب الشمس. It's the moment the sun sets. That's when this is when Maghrib begins. So this is Asr, or the end of Dhuhr. Here is Asr for the Hanafiyya. Right. And here's the beginning of Dhuhr. So Maghrib, the moment the sun sets under the horizon. Now for the Shafi'iyya, وهو غروب الشمس, the sunset, وبمقدار ما يؤذن ويتوضأ ويستر العورة ويقيم الصلاة ويصلي 5 ركعات. So the time of Maghrib is as much time as that is needed for you to make adhan, make wudu, get dressed if you're not wearing your proper clothing, make iqamah, pray 5 rak'at, which is 3 of Maghrib and 2 after it. So for the Shafi'i, for the way this is how the Shafi'iyya, that they don't see a prolonged time for Maghrib. Meaning you have to pray immediately when the adhan goes off, unless there's a darura for you. Unless you have to, but that is only for the Shafi'iyya. The Jumhur, the majority of scholars, of course, see that Maghrib time is prolonged until the beginning of Isha time, meaning until the end, until Maghrib al-Shafaq, until the disappearance of the Shafaq, and I'll explain that in a second. But for the Shafi'iyya, they don't see a prolonged time for Maghrib, meaning the moment Maghrib is 7:12, then you only spend as much time as you need to make wudu, dress properly, make iqamah, and pray. There's no prolonged time, but that's only for the Shafi'iyya, and they have their understanding for that, and they have their evidence regarding why, and that is the madhab al-jadid for Imam al-Shafi'i, right? The madhab al-qadim, meaning, so the Shafi'iyya Imam al-Shafi'i during his life, he had a madhab when he was in Mecca, and then he moved to Masr, and he had another madhab. So what we studied is al-jadid, the new madhab, but the older madhab, no, he didn't see it to be like that. He saw that there was prolonged time until the disappearance of the red shafaq, or the red light in the horizon.
So based on their evidence, they're saying that the Rasul every time he prayed.
That is his view. So that is his view. But the Jumhur, meaning the majority of scholars, don't see it. They see that it goes until the disappearance of the shafaq. Now, we'll move on to Isha just so I can explain the end of Maghrib, because I'll explain the end of Maghrib by explaining the beginning of the Isha. وَالْعِشَاءُ وَأَوَّلُ وَقْتِهَا إِذَا غَابَ الشَّفَقُ الْأَحْمَرُ. And the beginning of Isha, the light that is at the horizon. Now, how it works is that there are 2 lights that you see. There's the red light, and then after red, there's a lighter light that is more of a white light that also will go away. And after the white light goes away, then it's pitch dark until Fajr comes back, after the end of the night. So for the madhab al-qadim of Shafi'i, and the Hanabila and the Hanafiyya, all of them see Maghrib until the disappearance of the red shafaq. So there'll be red light here on the horizon. Someone standing over looking, you'll see red light here on the horizon, right? So until that red light is gone, because after the sun sets, there's still light at the horizon. There's going to be a red twilight. Now until that goes away, that's Maghrib time. When that red light is no longer there, that's the end of Maghrib. And the beginning of Isha. And that is for the old madhab of Shafi'i, and for the Hanafi and the Hanabila. The Maliki have a bit of a different look at things. They're more closer to what the Shafi'i says, but they have their own understanding. We'll talk about that inshallah at its time. Now, meaning the Maliki are a bit closer to what I just explained. The Maliki also see it to be very not prolonged, meaning the timing is only 10 or 15 minutes after the adhan of Maghrib. But the Jumhur say that until the disappearance of that red twilight in the horizon. Now, when it comes to talking about the beginning of Salat al-Isha, right? So, when the Prophet ﷺ talked about the end of Maghrib and the beginning of Isha, he talked about غياب الشفق, the absence or the disappearance of the twilight, or the light that's going to be in the horizon. Now, the scholars define the twilight differently. Some of them said it's the white light, it's the red light that you will see, and some of them said it's going to be the white light that comes after it, right? So, Abu Hanifa, rahmatullah alayhi, Imam al-Muzani, and a narration from Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal said that the twilight is actually the white light, not the red light. So, and based on that difference, we will find 2 times for the end of Maghrib and beginning of Isha. Based on that, you will find 2 opinions regarding when Maghrib ends and when Isha begins. We'll wait inshallah for the time. Allah. So the hadith that we have that talk about the end of Maghrib and beginning of Isha, talk about the word shafaq, which is jazakallah khair, twilight, because I wasn't sure. Alright, so what is the definition of shafaq? So what is which twilight? Because there's 2 types of light, 2 distinct types of light that you will see at the horizon just after Maghrib. You will see a red light, and then after that red light you will see a white light. And then both of them will disappear as well. So the Jumhur say it's the red light. That's their understanding. Now Abu Hanifa and Imam al-Muzani, and there's a narration taken from Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, that one of the narrations taken from him is that it's the white light. Now what difference is there between these timings? There's around an hour. There's around an hour to an hour and 15 minutes sometimes that is between both. So right now we're praying based on what the Jumhur says, that the shafaq is the red light. So right now we're praying it's 8:30, that's when Isha is. So if we were to do based on what the others said, then we would start around 10ish or 9:45. Something like that. 9:45 would be when Isha begins. So, but for Imam Shafi'i, what he says, and that of course it makes a difference for when Maghrib ends, because for the Jumhur, when the red light disappears, that's when Maghrib ends and Isha begins, right? And for for Abu Hanifa and the rest, or just the small group that sees it to be the white light, then when the white light disappears, that's when Isha begins and Maghrib ends. So Maghrib time is prolonged for the Hanafiya. It's a bit longer than it is for everyone else, and Isha starts a bit later. Now, when we're going to read what the Shafi'i scholar wrote here. وقتها العشاء إذا غاب الشفق الأحمر, the beginning of the time of Isha is when the red twilight disappears. وآخره في الاختيار إلى ثلث الليل, and the optimal time for you to pray it is up to the first third of the night. So from that moment till the end of the third of the night. So how do you calculate the third of the night? You look at when Maghrib and when Shuruq, when sunrise, right? So right now there's almost exactly 12 hours. You can look it over there. 7:18 is Shuruq and 7:12 is sunset. So almost exactly 12 hours. So what's a third of 12? 4. So until from 7:12, 4 hours, that's up to 11:12. So up to 11, quarter after 11, that's the optimal time for Isha for the Imam al-Shafi'i. وفي الجواز إلى طلوع الفجر الثاني, and it's permissible up till Fajr, up till the time of Salat al-Fajr for Imam al-Shafi'i. And that is also for how the Malikiyya see it and some of the Hanabila. However, Abu Hanifa does not see that there's an optimal time or permissible time. For Abu Hanifa, for the Hanafiya, for them, it starts after the white light is gone and it goes up till Fajr. There's no optimal time and there's nothing. Actually, some scholars talk about praying Salat al-Isha in the middle of the night to be, that there's some merit to that, because there's some ahadith that narrate that. So we put all these ideas together. It's just so you know that there's difference of opinions regarding of when you should be doing it. The idea is after the twilight disappears, whether the red twilight for the Jumhur or the white twilight for the Hanafiya specifically, and for a part of the Hanabila, this is when Isha begins. Imam Shafi'i sees that the optimal time is just like a couple of hours after that, before the third of the night is done. For the rest of them, there's no optimal time. It goes up till Fajr time. So you're allowed to pray until maybe 5 minutes before Fajr. You've still prayed Isha within the permissible time. Yes.
Can you recap those who said that from Isha to Fajr being totally fine?
So the Hanafiya don't see that there's an optimal and permissible time. They're fine up till then.
And then you also said the Hanabila.
And a part of the Hanabila, so half of the Hanabila. All right.
And then from Isha until midnight, because some say you can't go any further than that.
Yeah, so for the Shafi'i, for him, the optimal time is the first third of the night. Then after that is permissible. But no one says it's haram after midnight. It's not haram, it's just a matter of karaha, meaning it's not an optimal time. You should try and do it in the optimal time. That's it. Yeah.
So after half of the night, there's no like...
No.
It's like
No, it's not qada. No, yeah, it's only qada if you do after Fajr. But as long as before Fajr, it's not qada. All right, yeah. I do want to comment on something before we talk about Salat al-Subh, which is Fajr. Imam al-Nawawi and a number of scholars have followed him on commenting this. What he said, since we're studying something Shafi'i, I'll quote him on something. What he said was, ما بين المغرب والعشاء نصف سدس الليل. ما بين المغرب والعشاء, between Maghrib and Isha is نصف سدس الليل. So a 12th of the night. That's the amount of time that should be between Maghrib and Isha. Now, why am I quoting that right now? Now, obviously, living in a country in the northern hemisphere, where sometimes the night is extremely short, right? So, and this is something that I've always thought was worth at least the discussion, or worth the thought, is that if we were to take that rule that Imam Shafi'i looked at, which is between Maghrib and Isha is 12th of the night. So right now, based on the timings on that board over there, we have 12 hours of night, right? So how much should there be between Maghrib and Isha? Right? So if we have 12 hours of night time, a 12th of that is going to be 1 hour, right? So if you look at it, it's an hour and around 15 minutes. So it's a bit more than that, but something close to that. So if we talk about nighttime during July here in Canada, so sometimes you'll find that Maghrib is maybe 9:15, right? And Fajr will be around 3:15. So between 9:15 and 3:15 is, how many hours is that? 6. So exactly 6 hours. So if you were to take a 12th of the night, then it would have half an hour. Correct? So, and why I'm saying that is that if we were to following that rule and using that rule in countries where the actual duration of the night is not enough for a full night's sleep for on average for any individual, because especially when Ramadan comes around during those times, and it becomes important that we are capable of doing Qiyam al-Layl and doing Taraweeh and whatnot. If the night itself is not enough for us to do just to sleep within it, then maybe thinking about this rule, which is between Maghrib and Isha being a 12th of the night, could be of merit, meaning we end up with half an hour. So if Maghrib is 9:15, then Isha could be around 9:45, right? And you win around 30 to 35 minutes of praying Isha a bit earlier. And this is of course viewed within places that have darura, that where the night is extremely short. It is short to the point where some of the scholars, some of the books of Shafi'i and Malikiya specifically, because some of them lived in Spain during the Andalus time, they talked about the fact that they would observe the horizon and the shafaq would never go away. Meaning the shafaq would stay there for the red twilight, because they would be on the opinion of the red twilight staying, and the red twilight would stay for 2-3 hours. Right, so they would talk about, well, now Maghrib Isha, there's like 3.5 hours. We're praying Isha like at 2 o'clock in the morning, and then Fajr is like a few hours later. So they would talk about stuff like that, and they would one of the the most common considerations that the scholars talked about was that you would pray based on the timings of the closest place where the red twilight would disappear on a regular normal average or a normal timing. So you would follow that group. I found that the idea that Imam Shafi'i came up with, which is that between Maghrib and Isha is nisfu sudusil layl, which is the 12th of a night, is actually would have a lot of merit, specifically when you're living in countries when the light is extremely short. So that way you could pray Maghrib, and then in half an hour, 45 minutes, you could pray Isha and then do Taraweeh. And they would, in addition to that, what is how long should Taraweeh take? To the longest, a third of the night. So that's the longest it should take. وَنِصْفَهُ وَثُلُثَهُ وَطَائِفَةٌ مِّنَ الَّذِينَ مَعَكَ. So the Quran talked about the Prophet ﷺ doing qiyam, a third of the night is acceptable. So if it's 6 hours, then 2 hours is a third of the night. So if Maghrib is at 9:15, then 2 hours would be up till 11:15. So Taraweeh should be done at 11:15. Adding to that most scholars, like Imam Qadi Iyad rahimahullah, talked about the fact that the sunnah of Taraweeh is reciting the Quran. Is that it shouldn't be less than a khitmah. It shouldn't be more than a khitmah, specifically in places where the night is very short and it's difficult for people to stay up like that. But however, they didn't see Taraweeh being less than that. I think these things are important to be considered. Specifically, maybe now Ramadan is moving out of the summer. We're coming closer to springtime, but it will become of importance when it circulates another 30 years and Ramadan is back in the middle of June, and then or July, and the days are extremely short. Okay. I just wanted to share that as an idea to kind of, to think about things. وَالصُّبْحُ, so after that, وَأَوَّلُ وَقْتِهَا, so we talked about Salat al-Fajr, and the beginning of the time of Salat al-Subh, طُلُوعُ الْفَجْرِ الثَّانِي, it is the emerging of the second Fajr, right, of the second Fajr. So it's not the first beam of light. So if you're standing looking at the horizon from the east, the first beam of light is not Fajr, right, because that beam of light will appear and then it'll go away. Meaning, for the naked eye, you will see it for a couple of seconds, and then it will completely disappear. And then after that, a beam of light will appear, and it won't go away. And that is called al-Fajr al-Thani, or al-Fajr al-Sadiq, which is means the honest dawn. Right? So that's meaning. Yeah. So sorry. True dawn. Yeah, true dawn. So it's no longer going to go away anymore. But if you're looking at the horizon around 2 o'clock in the morning, around 3:30, you will see a beam of light, but it will stay for a few minutes and then it'll disappear. And then you'll wait for a while, and then another dawn will come up and it'll stick, and that's called Fajr al-Sadiq, the true dawn, or the second dawn, and that is when Fajr actually begins. وَآخِرُهُ فِي الْإِخْتِيَارِ, and for Imam Shafi'i, like we did the same thing, for him the optimal time is until Isfar. Isfar is before the sun actually comes up, but when there's enough light coming from the horizon that you can see faces. Al-Musfir is a person whose face is apparent. That's why Mar'a Musfira means that she has hijab but you can see her face. So Isfar means when there's enough light that you can see the person's face. For the Imam Shafi'i, up till that point, that's the perfect time to pray, the permissible time. وفي الاختيار وفي الجواز إلى طلوع الشمس, and then it's permissible until the sun actually, the sun actually emerges from the horizon. But for Imam Shafi'i, he has two times: a time where it's optimal and a time where it's permissible. Not all the scholars agree to that, but that's what the Imam Shafi'i says. We'll continue, inshallah. Actually, I think we'll stop with this. Would you want to come back and continue for 10 minutes, or should we stop here?
Stop it. It's quite, I think it's a good point.
Okay, we'll stop with this. We'll continue inshallah next week at 8 o'clock sharp. Inshallah. Jazakum Allah khair. Subhanakallah bihamdik. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in.